I think that Joshua puts more eyes on the price.
After that Fury performance, you go, what is the biggest fight in boxing today?
I think the biggest fight in heavyweight boxing right now, through intrigue, is Joshua versus Wilder. Welcome to Talk Boxing with Simon Jordan and Spencer Oliver. This is episode 47. As always, don't forget to keep liking and subscribing to the channel and leaving questions in the comment section below. I'm in the midst of a bit of a conundrum because apparently, strangely, perhaps tragically, Spencer's done a lot of research. So we'll look forward to what that plays out in the show. And also, I've been led to the understanding that there's something relatively interesting coming. That's dreadful, like nothing else is interesting, doesn't it? That something quite significant is coming in one of our shows that are coming in the future. So keep your eye out for that because it could be very interesting. Spence, all right, mate? You okay?
Simon, all good, thanks. Yourself?
Yeah, not bad, not bad. Went to the fireworks.
By the way, before you say that I've been doing some research, etc., etc., no, I just put a couple of suggestions.
Okay.
Towards the show.
Well, given that you very rarely put any suggestions,
and that's why our producer Pat was so pleased, so surprised, and yeah, that's where we're at.
Good week, bad week?
Yeah, good week, really good week. Every week's a good week.
Yeah, I went to the fireworks display last night. It's the only chance I've got recently of having a bang of any sort.
How was that, by the way?
It was okay. It was okay. Yes, yes, my 3-year-old son on my shoulders. Right, one of the subjects that you brought up, and we were discussing off air, was the ongoing debate about the value of the Tyson Fury and Ngannou experience. Mm-hmm. And figures have come out, and I don't know why they're coming out, but obviously there's a blowback to the success. I think a lot of the noise that Tyson made is causing a ripple in people's minds about what they actually got to witness and how spectacular this event was and how everyone should be a buy into it. The pay-per-view numbers are coming out.
I think the interest in this was that people were interested to see what the crossover would be and whether the pay-per-view numbers would exceed what you'd get in a big-time boxing match. I think that was the interest. I think that's probably why the numbers have come out because the numbers were not as high as they were expecting. I think.
Well, the rumours that are doing the rounds are that they got 400,000 buys on TNT, right?
Yeah.
But the one that people are really alighting upon is the 56,000 buys they got on ESPN.
Yes, right.
Right. Now, to give that some context, because that doesn't look like big numbers, does it?
No. Let's not forget that DAZN had it free to air as well in certain territories.
Absolutely. So that adds to the equation. But one would have expected to have seen bigger numbers. And when we look at do you know what the biggest pay-per-view numbers have ever been? Do you know what the fight was?
The biggest pay-per-view numbers, I think it was Mayweather versus McGregor. Was it 4.8 million?
4.6 million.
4.6 million?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. So when we get context.
And then you had Mayweather Pacquiao number 2, I think, about 4 million or somewhere around there.
And then you've got Anthony Joshua, you've gone down, you've had Tyson fighting Frank Bruno, you've had Tyson fighting Evander Holyfield around the 2 million mark.
Anthony Joshua was around 1.6, 1.8 million, I believe, against Klitschko.
Yeah, and 1.2 and 1.4s on a regular basis.
Yeah.
But the 400,000 that they got, I mean, do you think this shows anything? I mean, the Errol Spence Terence Crawford fight got 700,000 buys.
Yeah.
Right. The Tommy Fury and Jake Paul fight got 800,000 buys.
Yeah.
Right. So when you see and hear that Tyson, because they're talking about this unprecedented success, and Frank and his entourage are talking about the enormity of the event, and when you hear these sort of figures, what does it tell us? If they're to be believed.
Well, I think the surprise was that the figures were as low as they were, because obviously with the crossover, you're thinking Ngannou's bringing his crowd. Tyson Fury is the number one heavyweight in our sport. So what does it tell us? It tells us that maybe is he the biggest pay-per-view star in boxing? On those numbers, you would say no. But also, is there an appetite for the crossover boxing? I think that was the big one for me, because I thought that the numbers would be maybe 1 million. I thought that's where we would be, because Ngannou has a huge following as well. I was surprised that the numbers were as low as they were, if I'm totally honest.
Yeah, I mean, it tells you, obviously, in America, there was very little interest in it.
None, yeah.
And we were talking, and I saw various analysis being made about how much this fight cost, right? Because I was under the impression, and I really don't care either which way, but for the purpose of the discussion, that Fury was getting the best part of 50 mil, and Ngannou was getting 10 mil, but now I'm being told it's 30 mil.
And but that's US, right?
Dollars, yeah, but if you take 1.2, it's 1.2. It's still 40 million quid and 25 million quid. So it's still significant scale. And then the rest of the event was undercards and cost implications and all the celebrities being flown in at the cost of the Saudis, and that this was not an event that would break even, and that was something that people needed to pay attention to. But I think people are missing the intention behind this. I don't think the Saudis could give a rat's ass about what it costs.
What are we talking? We're talking like, you're talking what, 120 million or something like that to put the actual stage the event and everything that's surrounding it. But no, that was a question I was going to ask you. So you go, well, you're looking at the profits on that, and there's about 16 million quid in profits. So let's say they're minus 115 million or something like that. But when you, what is the reasoning? Like we had this conversation.
I don't think they give the slightest. I mean, if people are talking,
so what is the purpose behind those?
Because
they want to get
they're
announcing
themselves on the stage of an ability to be able to host such events. I mean, when you talk about the Saudis and the wealth that they've got, they've spent £800 million on transfer fees in football in the last 2 or 3 months. They're bringing footballers in on £25, £30 million a year. The economics of whether this fight made money or not is incidental,
right?
Because it's not about that. At some point, the Saudis will want sport and everything they do to stand on its own 2 feet. But this is a marketing campaign. This is a launching of the sequence of the Middle Eastern ability to be able to house and host the biggest events. Now, whether you think
so, it's not about pay-per-view numbers.
Well, nobody wants low pay-per-view numbers. Nobody wants numbers that aren't reflective of the value of the environment. But I think a lot of this is because the Western media, and by that I mean people like us, weren't particularly complimentary about the lead up to the fight. Didn't think it was a fight befitting of the WBC heavyweight champion of the world. Certainly post the event, don't think it was a performance befitting of the WBC heavyweight champion of the world. And it does bring into question, because I think Fury...
Do you think it would have had a black backlash, though, off the back of Fury Usyk not being made before that? Do you think that would have affected this fight because we got Ngannou instead and people were going, well, I'm not paying for that because we want the undisputed?
Well, it depends whose argument you want to hear. I
mean, from the public in general.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, the public, with respect to the public, are often given a reason to... I mean, we both said to us, to the ether and to the fighters themselves, that the Fury versus Chisora fight wasn't a great fight. Yet Frank will tell us, Frank Warren, that when we go on sale for the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in the middle of December, we sell out the event. So live has produced a certain outcome. The pay-per-views, I don't know what they were, but I think the key question you take from this is, does crossover fights like this, they may well do now because they've just seen the heavyweight champ of the world put on his arse. Right? So they may well think that the little dance that was engineered between Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather, that got 4.5 million views, 4.5 million buys, that was really Floyd Mayweather carrying him around the ring for as long as it was interesting.
It would have probably affected the sales on this one because people would have thought it would have been the same outcome. Now Fury's been on the seat of his arse in the third round. It may actually increase the interest. There may be more of an appetite for it because I believe that this crossover thing is going to continue. I think that there is going to be more of it.
But I also think it raises the question, because I've made this point on a number of occasions about Fury and Joshua and how Fury went over to America, did his Nacho Libre impressions, did his Apollo Creed stuff, right? Went and fought Wilder in America and did decent numbers, and I thought he'd cracked the American marketplace. And Anthony Joshua had gone over there. He wasn't particularly well known. There wasn't a huge opinion of him in terms of the body of work that he had. And probably when you look more and more at his body of work, I think there's some unfairness, and some of it from me as well. He gets knocked on his backside by Andy Ruiz, gets the rematch in Saudi. But the question is Fury as big a deal in boxing terms as we think he is? Because I think, and it's not because I'm a convert and all of a sudden I've had an epiphany, I think that Joshua puts more eyes on the price. I think there's something about Anthony Joshua and it may well be like the Adam Catterall argument. That when you look at Fury's body of work, 6 world title fights, 3 against the same fella, 2 against, or 5, 2 against others that he's already beaten. And then you look at Joshua's, he's had 12 world title fights, and his body of work would look on paper to be more significant. And then you look at the pay-per-views that Anthony has gotten, whether it's 1.2 million or 1.4 million against Joseph Parker or whatever it is. And I think there's a debate suggesting that he got 1 million, or best part of, against Robert Helenius. Right. All of this, I think, if you put Joshua in the fight against Ngannou,
he does more.
I think you'd have got more.
Absolutely, and this is why I am where I am, because Anthony Joshua, coming through that 2012 Olympics, you know, he was the star. You know, he was the poster boy in the Olympics, coming through. You know, his whole journey and everything else. It sort of captured the imagination. So he captured people outside of the sporting world, outside of the boxing world. You know, he become globally famous, and I think that's why. And people love the story.
But not in America.
They loved it. Not in America, or maybe even so. Let's just say in England. Then he become anybody knows who Anthony Joshua is.
Do you think broadcasters have anything to play? Because
I think I think he was inspirational, and I think that made a big part of why he gets so many big numbers.
But let me ask you. Let me repackage that then. Do you think that if this had been on Sky, this would have got a better buy-in?
I think it would have got a better buy-in on Sky anyway, because of the platform. But
so it's interesting because Joshua obviously built his career, broadcasting-wise, on the back of Sky. And of course his achievements, and then pivoted onto DAZN when the Sky relationship had run its course, or whatever, or Matchroom and Sky had run their course.
Sure.
And I just think that we're now moving into territory where I read a really interesting article, and I think Frank Warren's spitting about it, written by a guy called Rick Broadbent, that was very, very disparaging of the whole fiasco. And he cited what he considers to be a fiasco of the WBC heavyweight champion of the world going into a fight with an MMA fighter, getting knocked on his backside, using analogies like a ping pong player playing against Novak Djokovic on a Wimbledon final and expecting to win. And this is the analogy that he used in conjunction with Francis Ngannou, and that it actually brought an element of discredit to the sport, and that the WBC should be ashamed of themselves for facilitating a solution and providing this sort of outcome. And if these numbers are right, then they add weight to that argument. The fact that Tyson's got paid X amount of money is because Frank Warren is skillful enough to have stolen a march on every other promoter, got his relationship with the PIF fund, opened it with an event that they weren't particularly worried about in terms of, does it wash its face? Because again, the argument that we were talking about at the beginning of this conversation, and I see being aired on various social media platforms via various boxing so-called aficionados, that this hasn't made its money back. Well, you're misguided if you think the Saudis were bothered by that.
Yeah, absolutely.
This was simply
that was not the purpose of it.
No, it wasn't. Yeah. It was a fiesta. Yeah. It was basically, here we are now here, and we don't care what it takes to get what we want. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah. And opening Riyadh season with that is like you're hitting two markets there as well, with the UFC star, boxing star, and that's it's not about making money at this stage. It's all about announcing their arrival on the boxing stage. I totally get that. I mean, it's an interesting one because if you look at after that Fury performance, you go, what is the biggest fight in boxing today? What would the biggest fight in boxing be today? Because I don't believe it's Fury versus
in heavyweight boxing.
Yeah.
Well, if you're, I should imagine, and you can speak to this just as well as I can, if you are a great believer that the belts need to be unified in this four belt division, as we have now, then, and you're a purist, you want to see an undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, don't you?
What does the biggest pay-per-view buys?
Again, depends what you think. It depends what you judge boxing by. Are you judging it by what is the best fight, or are you judging by what generates the most revenue?
No, what generates the most pay-per-view sales? What I'm saying is, so that what I mean by that is, who are the biggest names in boxing to generate that? I believe it's Joshua Fury. I think that's still the biggest fight out there. Not I get the boxing fans, the boxing purists. We all want the undisputed. That's the fight we want. Hopefully we get that in late February. I think that's the rumours, isn't it? That we get that. But I think the biggest fight out there financially is still Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury.
Maybe
going on those box office.
Yeah,
numbers.
I think so. But we're in danger of being in an echo chamber and in a prism where we look at it through the eyes of a UK boxing scene, right? Because I'm not entirely sure the world scene looks at Anthony Joshua right now as a viable challenger to Tyson Fury based upon his last two performances. Albeit now that's been thrown upside down because people are going to look at Tyson Fury in a different way. I don't think that fight determines the outcome of the Usyk fight when Fury fights him.
Definitely not.
But I think the biggest fight in heavyweight boxing right now, through intrigue and cross-Atlantic engagements and potential value, is Joshua versus Wilder.
Yeah.
I think that's a shootout. It's not a case of a big man fighting a small cruiserweight. That both fighters now, Usyk and Fury, are slightly diminished a little bit because people are beginning to wonder if Usyk's seen his better days after his performance against Daniel Dubois and a vulnerability has been shown. And then you look at Fury and say you've been knocked on your arse by an MMA fighter.
With Fury though, that fear factor, because that fear factor isn't there. That's why historically you look through his performances and he does that where he if he's boxing someone that's a lesser caliber, he will box below par. And we saw that against Ngannou. The downfall for Ngannou in this one, by the way, is because now people are going, well, Ngannou's proved himself and that he can compete with all the top heavyweights. You're talking about Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder. The downfall for Ngannou is when he fights, if he fights Anthony Joshua, if he fights Deontay Wilder, they will be prepared for that, knowing what he is, and it will be a different outcome. Yeah. And I think that Fury's paid the price for that because I think that Fury boxed below par for those reasons.
But he reaps what he sows because he wanted to take this fight. I don't care how many times people get irritated or they want to justify it. It should have been a stroll in the park for him.
Yes.
It should have been an opportunity to bank some money, establish the relationship with the Saudis and move on to the next thing. And as it stands, again, for some part of me, I don't know why, I just think that the more intriguing fight is Joshua versus Wilder.
Yeah,
and
I like that.
And I think everything should be pulled out to try and make that fight if they can make it commercially viable in returns to what the fighters want. Look,
but from a history point of view, we want the last undisputed fight we had 1999 was Evander Holyfield.
Yeah, and I went to that.
Versus Lennox Lewis.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
So from a history point of view, we need the undisputed. It's what we've all wanted.
But even that was shrouded in
controversy
because I went to the Madison Square Garden fight.
Yeah.
And I think that Lennox absolutely categorically won it. I went to the one in Las Vegas.
A lot closer.
And I think actually Evander Holyfield won the fight.
Yeah,
and they gave it to Lennox.
Yeah.
But look, do you think we're going to see any of the major heavyweights out again in 23? I mean, we haven't got much long of it left.
No, we haven't, and that's my major concern because I know Anthony Joshua wants to box in December or before Christmas. I know that he wants to do that, and I don't think it's going to be possible now because I think we're running out of time. I don't know where that is because I've heard that Zhale Zhang is injured. I think Frank Warren said that Zhale Zhang was injured.
Did he?
So he's out, and that's a fight that I would love to have seen, Anthony Joshua versus Zhang. So I believe that Zhang is out until after Christmas. Don't know where Joe Joyce is. I mean, Joe Joyce, Anthony Joshua is a fight I wouldn't mind seeing. I don't know, but I don't think time's on our side, Simon. I'm totally honest. What are we talking? 7 weeks, 7, 8 weeks? Yeah, it's not going to be enough time. I'm not sure that we do see any of the heavyweights out again before Christmas.
Do you think that Ngannou has a place at the table here? Or?
I think we could see someone like Ngannou versus Joseph Parker. I think December. Were they talking December the 15th or something? December the 9th or one of those dates that I heard that could be possible.
Do you think Joe Parker's got a place in the heavyweight division now of any significance?
Listen, I think it's just another big fight for the Saudis. I think it's just a game, like you said, it's not about the financial reward at the moment. And I think the Saudis, just about them getting recognition.
You think the Saudis would put on Ngannou versus Joe Parker?
I think they would. Do you?
No, I can't see why. Because
Parker had a good win out there last time on the undercard. He looked all right. And I think that Ngannou done himself well as well. And I just think that, look, it's not going to be a fight like Fury and Ngannou. It's not going to be on that sort of scale or like Joshua versus Usyk. But what I'm saying is, I think there's I think there's still a home for it. I think there's the Saudis will still have an appetite for that.
If we're not going to see any of the big heavyweights out this year, and Joseph Parker versus Francis...
Do you think we're going to have any of the heavyweights out? I mean, who do you think?
I think we should try and see Anthony Joshua out.
I really hope we do.
And maybe Daniel Dubois, but who they get matched against, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, Fury's going to fight Usyk if what we're led to believe is true, which is no reason to say that it isn't. Frank Warren's absolutely adamant that they're going to fight. He always was consistent that they were going to fight in Riyadh season. So I'm not the one losing my mind over the December 23rd dates. And again, it's a Fury observation that it needs to be fought on the 23rd. And they're saying it's a Fury observation on the back of Usyk saying to them, you've got to fight on the 23rd.
But I understand with Fury, because of where he's at and how hard that fight ended up being, his body will need time to recover. Hence, I think the 23rd was a date that they really wanted. That was the penciled in date. But I think now Fury needs a bit of time off. And it's talking end of Riyadh season, aren't you? End of February time.
But there's an irony, and we discussed it last week, about Fury needing time off in the same way that Anthony Joshua would have needed time off after the second Usyk loss.
Yeah.
And we saw the psychological effect of that second loss, yet there was no forbearance in the Fury camp. He has to fight by the end of November, which is pretty much the same period. So what's sauce for the goose should be good for the gander, right?
Understood.
But when we look at the shake-up next year, if we see Fury versus Usyk in February, where do you think Anthony Joshua is likely to land? If he doesn't fight in December, when was the last time he fought? July?
August time, was it? August time, I think it was.
Right.
Was it? Yeah.
Was it August?
I think so.
Robert Hellenius.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. Sorry, yes, it was,
time,
because I just come back to it. It was August the 15th or something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
In around that sort of time.
Yeah.
So you'd like to think Anthony was going to get out in December, but if he doesn't, where do you see when and where do you think he'll land? And then we've got the next question about Joe Joyce. Then we've got the next question about Zhilei Zhang. Then we've got the next question about Daniel Dubois.
Yeah, and I think that the names you've just mentioned there, I can see them all sort of mixing together now, and that's because this undisputed fight is coming together. I think that we've got to throw Deontay Wilder obviously in that mix as well, but I think that we now see these guys all getting it on as opposed to trying to wait for this opportunity. Filip Hrgović is there as well. Yep. He's waiting for his shot as well. Yep. But listen, while this undisputed fight goes on and there's that rematch clause in it as well, the titles will become fragmented and the guys might be able to box for ones, but you've got to see your Hrgovic's versus, your Anthony Joshua's, Deontay Wilder, Joshua.
But there's also an opportunity, isn't there, on a slightly further down the pecking order in this country, for other peoples to steal a march and fill that vacuum. Fraser Clark, Fabio Wardley, Moses Atuma. They can gain a lot of interest and traction if there's fights made for those guys during this period of time.
Definitely.
And fill that vacuum.
Absolutely.
And start to build up their backstories and start to
create the next superstars.
Create the next raft of interest, commerciality, and pique the public's interest in these guys, because I thought Fabio did very well against David Adelaide.
He stock rose again massively. And David Adelaide was in the studio Saturday, by the way, and he took defeat very graciously, and he said, you know what, look, sometimes that can make a fighter, going back to when David Hay lost to Cole Thompson. He went away, he rebuilt, and he come back and he achieved what he achieved. And so he understands where it is, but he was very gracious in defeat, which I liked about that. He said that's, if anything, made him, forced him to work harder. And so I think he still very much fits in that picture because experience beat him as opposed to anything else. I think he blew a gasket after about 6 rounds. But Fabio Wardley, for me, stock rose again because he's going to become a serious contender, I think, Fabio. He looked good.
We're a little bit dry on the boxing front at the moment, aren't we? I mean, we do need something significant to happen. We've got some fights. We've got Chris Billam-Smith fighting. Yeah. We've got Ryan Garcia fighting.
Adam Azim on November 18th fighting. The European.
But hopefully, if we're, given, I don't know if you're hearing these noises, but there's a growing sense of optimism that maybe we might see the Boazzi-Aziz fight.
Early part of next year.
This early part of this, I thought I was under the impression we might see it before Christmas.
I don't think we will.
No?
No. But unless Aziz is healing better than what I originally thought, I think it's going to be early part of next year, and I'm thinking January sort of time, around January 20th, around that sort of date. I think, I don't think we'll see it this side of Christmas.
I tell you what was interesting as well, while there's not a lot of fights going on, was watching the runners and riders in sports media, what's happening in that space. And there was obviously some indexing towards Netflix, and Netflix being a potential broadcaster coming into this space and creating. We've watched DAZN. And I personally think the Saudis will buy DAZN.
Yeah.
That's what I think will happen.
That's an interesting one,
and we'll see if that happens. But obviously we've heard, or not obviously, we are beginning to hear rumblings of Netflix potentially wanting to get involved in the sports market. They've always stayed out of it.
December the 15th is the rumour with Jake Paul.
Yeah. They've always stayed out of it, Netflix, because the cost implication of buying sports rights has been a deterrent. Their business model has been to, first of all, buy other people's content, put it up on their platform and develop a subscriber base. Then they started to produce their own content. But they've always been deterred because the cost of sports broadcasting has been a problem for them.
So why show the appetite now? What is
well,
the,
I
what
think
is the
they've
reason
seen,
behind that?
well, they're seeing this traction of the Drive to Survive series with the F1. They've seen the traction. Okay, the Beckham documentary is something unique because he's considered to be a social icon, and so he transcends just sport. But you know, you look at the All or Nothings with the Tottenhams of the world and the Sunderlands of the world, and they've seen the engagement, and then they might be looking at a sport like boxing that doesn't have the same cost implications behind it as football to acquire the rights. And I think it's an interesting one because
could it be because of the collapse of HBO and Showtime and stuff like that as well?
Yeah.
You go, there's a bigger opportunity now. With
Could be. It could be a variety of things, but it's also interesting because you're watching the Amazons of the world. You know, I was one of my good friends is the former creative operating officer, the number 2 at Amazon.
Yeah.
And one of the big things that he was talking about was the interest in Amazon acquiring sports rights.
Yeah.
And of course they've done it in the Premier League.
Are they interested in boxing?
Well, I'm about to get to that, but they've also done it in American football. And one of the most successful campaigns, because don't forget Amazon is a selling machine. It's all about drawing eyes onto the Amazon prize and being able to distribute through it. So when they bought the Premier League rights, it was all about doing the whole fixture list on what day? Boxing Day. What's one of the biggest sell days of the year? Boxing Day. Now, the boxing space is ripe for this. And I think someone like an Amazon or Netflix coming in, because it's a strange landscape in terms of broadcasting. You know, but maybe that's because there's not enough content out there. But it seems to me that you've got Sky over here, you've got TNT or BT Sport as it once was.
Yeah.
You've got DAZN, which I don't quite know what DAZN are actually achieving.
Yeah.
Albeit they're getting more and more subscribers, and I know that they'll probably not like this observation that I don't think it's a particularly good platform, but I haven't thought it's a particularly good platform. And I think Netflix, if they're coming to the table, there is lots more that can be done with boxing from a broadcast point of view.
How would it affect these broadcasters though? Like, because like you say there, it's an interesting one because with Netflix, the younger generation, my kids and the younger generation all watch Netflix. They don't really watch TV. They don't watch Sky. So what I'm saying is it would sort of capture that market. How do you think if Netflix do decide to come into boxing, it would affect DAZN, it would affect TNT, Sky Sports?
Well,
do you think it would have an effect on them as in viewing figures?
What it might do is drive the price up. No, I don't mean for the consumer. I mean for the industry to get more broadcasting revenue. Right. Because if you've got a Netflix, Netflix is not a hugely profitable business, but it's got a business that's got a market cap of about 255 billion. So as far as the size of business, it's huge. So if you've got more broadcasters coming in, there's a tendency that it can make it more disparate, which means like the Premier League now in football, you've got 15 different subscriptions to watch it across different platforms to try and get the content that you want. What it might do is it might increase revenues in the sport because then you've got more competitive tension. You've got more people that are saying, I want to buy these rights, so I'm going to pay more money for them. And all of a sudden, Sky and TNT are being challenged by VOD platforms because DAZN is a video on demand platform. Netflix is a video on demand platform. I think it opens up a different opportunity, but it may well just be because my understanding of it is that they're looking at Jake Paul as their headline act, and it may just be that they're going for a certain marketplace
where they know generate huge numbers. Yeah.
I think that the more discussions, you know, you've got businesses signing deals with American networks now. You've got Boxer trying to create different broadcasting opportunities and open up different marketplaces. I think the boxing world is still susceptible and ripe for better commercialization. And if the Netflix of the world come in and put more eyes on the prize and create more revenue for the sport, and the economics of it are that the consumer, the punter that's watching it, gets to see more of the sport, more of the feelings about the sport, and actually more live content in a different fashion, then I think it's a good thing.
Do you think, though, with Netflix coming in with a Jake Paul, I mean, he gets his own numbers because he's got a huge number, so it won't really tell the proper numbers of if you had a fight with two boxers as opposed to someone. I know.
Well, it gets. I mean, look. I mean, Jake Paul.
Does that make sense?
Jake Paul. Yeah. Jake
what
Paul,
I'm saying is the numbers will be huge when Jake Paul boxes. But what happens when you get a Dillian Whyte versus Joseph Parker type fight?
Well, I don't know. I mean, ultimately, it depends how Netflix want to position themselves. If they want to go for something live, now, if they're going for a Jake Paul of the world, which has a subscriber set of numbers that they can bring and they can cost fertilize, and the content they watch Jake Paul for, they can pick and match in other aspects of Netflix. Right. It all about how big their appetite is and what their agenda is. I personally think the more people that are talking about boxing in broadcasting terms, the better it is. Right. You know, the days of Showtime and HBO and the ascent of Mike Tyson and the scale of the rewards for fighters are only being really replicated by Canelo Alvarez and Floyd Mayweather and actually Anthony Joshua. Yeah. No one else has really got to those sort of heights. And I'm not advocating for that to be the case, that ultimately we see $400 million boxing deals signed and that Tyson Fury must be paid £500 million. What I'm advocating for is the growing of the sport. Sure. And also, hopefully, the more broadcasters get involved. What happens with broadcasters, they want good content, and then we stop this about fights not being made. Yeah. WBC being prepared to have a fighter not fight for a year for one of their belts, 4 or 5 different belts being scattered. You might see a streamlining and a new format coming out of boxing, and there might be different ideas that start to see a methodology that delivers the best fights, delivers relationships with fighters, builds up more tribalism. Because I think the interesting thing about boxing is that it's a fascinating engagement, but the tribalism side of sport, where you pick your team, isn't in boxing. You pick your fighter, you move on to the next one. And I think these are all things that can change in the boxing landscape. And I think there's going to be some interesting formats, whether, the prize fighter format and an expansion of that, whether there's an opportunity to change the way that boxing is watched so that you can watch the North versus the South in a league competition where there's more outcomes. You've got the Professional Fighters League in MMA trying to create more jeopardy in every single fight. So I think there's just a fascinating landscape, and
changing in the times.
I hope so, because as an enthusiastic watcher, you sit there and you watch some of it sometimes, and you think this could be so much better for this brilliant sport.
Well, that's why I feel that we are in this crossover, changing in the times thing with the UFC fighters coming in, the YouTubers, etc. And let's watch this space.
Anyway, slightly different episode this week, but hopefully equally as compelling. That's it for episode 47. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And myself and Spencer will see you next time out.